for joining the MITS webinar today. I know that Gary's got a full plate, and we're going to be doing a presentation and then followed by as much Q&A as we can handle. Just so you know, you've got a question and answer bank on your control panel, so if you have questions at any point along the way, feel free to type them in. Gary Owen, who's doing the presentation, will be monitoring the questions as he goes along. And then also, when we get to the Q&A, if you want to raise your hand, I will unmute you and you can participate in the asking your question. Also, so you know, we're going to record this webinar like we record all of our webinars. It'll be up on the TUG site by tomorrow. If you go to theusergroup.org and click on the YouTube, the orange YouTube button at the very top right of the website, you will discover a page that has all of our TUG webinar recordings on it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colin Sherman to get the webinar started. Give me 1 second, Colin, and let me start the recording here.
All right. Hi, everybody. For those that haven't met me before, I'm Colin Sherman. I'm the Director of Sales here at MITS, and I wanted to come on and kind of introduce Gary. But before I do that, I wanted to share a little bit about who we are, as this is really not a normal demo. We're not going to show the functionality and the features in detail that basically are the reason why our company exists. We're going to talk more about the concepts of what we do and some of the newer concepts that we're bringing to distribution. So just really quickly, we are a software company out of Seattle, and we primarily make software for wholesale distributors. That's the main thing that we do. And the software that we make is business intelligence software. Really, our goal is to give you guys the ability to make your own reports, you know, drill down into them, trend them, make dashboards, look at dashboards, and get that data out to people. All of that's very easy in our tool. In addition to that, though, we've also taken all of the feedback we've gotten from our over 450 distributors over the 20 years we've been in business, and we've said, what does this actually need to do? They've given us all of this feedback, and we've taken it and we've put it into the software. So in addition to all of this ability to make your own reports and dashboards and such, there's also a huge library of content already mapped, already created, already there for SX.e and ready to go. What Gary's going to show today is content that's already created and ready to go for SX.e. That's really what he's going to be talking about. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Gary Owen, our CEO, to begin the presentation. Gary?
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Colin, and for the little overview there. Yeah, as Colin mentioned, today is not going to be primarily a demo. I'm actually going to be spending most of the time sort of talking through the build-up to the content that we're going to show and how we kind of put things together and the design work that we did. And the reason that I want to do that is that today, especially for the earlier part of the presentation, the stuff that we're getting into is relatively advanced in terms of how we're allowing you to analyze and slice and dice the information coming out of the SX system. So I want to make sure that we do a good job kind of building up the capabilities, because once we see what we can do with this information when we organize it the right way, it's going to be really powerful. But if we just dump right into the middle of it without doing that build up and kind of talking around the concept and how we got there, then it's going to be lacking. And that's something that's really important to us, is that we're not just here building technology for the sake of building it. We're not just writing features because we think they're interesting and cool. That is part of what we enjoy doing, but that's not really the purpose behind the company. We want to figure out how to get those tool sets together in a way that are going to help you make better decisions with your business, which means we got to get it in front of people in a way that they're going to be able to use and understand. So that's going to be a lot of what we talk about today. The agenda is relatively straightforward. I actually stuck a little bit more. We had discussed kind of two things that we wanted to show today. If we have time, we're going to do another one as well. And so those are going to be the beginning here. We're going to talk about customer comparisons or doing cross-selling. And that's going to be an interesting one. That'll take up a big chunk of time. The next piece, we're going to talk about warehouse logistics from a tactical perspective. That's kind of interesting approach for us, a little bit different than some of the things we've done historically, so I'm looking forward to showing you that. And then finally, I want to go through a couple of big picture dashboards that we put together this year for the SX market. And that will be a little bit of review. We have covered that in some webinars before, so we'll do that relatively briefly if we have time at the end. And then, of course, we'll do a little bit of Q&A. Now, I don't want you to wait to put those questions into the Q&A panel, though, because I will try to address them. A lot of times it's a lot easier to address a question immediately when you're looking at the concept. So if you have a question, put it into the Q&A panel, and I will try to, before I transition from one topic to another, try to take those questions and address them with the content that we were just looking at, so we don't have to go back into the past, and you don't have to sit and wait for 15 minutes to get your question answers. All right. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into that first topic, that customer comparison and cross-selling feature that we're discussing here. And this is really around the idea of finding opportunities where you can expand the business that you're doing within customers that you already service. Right? There's a large portion of the distribution business that has to do with figuring out how to fully capitalize on the opportunity that's presented in each of those customers you have a relationship with, right? So those are a large element of kind of farming style selling that's going on in the distribution business, of making sure that those customers are being taken care of and that you're executing on the opportunities that those businesses present that you work with. And so there's this concept of cross-selling. And so we've been doing some research on this concept and trying to figure out kind of what the different approaches are, what the benefits are of each of those different ones, and which ones we think are going to fit the best into the industry at this particular point in time. So I've put together a little bit of information on that, and then we'll dive into exactly how we implemented it. So the way that I've been thinking about cross-selling as we've been going through this process of thinking it through is there's really 3 different approaches that you can take. And this is very, very big picture kind of groupings here. And you could argue maybe there's 5 or maybe there's 4, maybe there's 2, I don't know. But for my thinking, there's really kind of 3 big approaches that we're looking at. They're sort of statistical modeling is one level, there's a data-driven level, and there's a completely human-directed level. And if you can see here on the left, I kind of put this technical sophistication here. As you move kind of further up the stack, you're increasing the technical sophistication that you have to take advantage of these different opportunities. So let's go through and kind of describe what I mean in each of these different chunks and see how they fit together, talk about some of the pluses and minuses. The first piece is this idea of a directed cross-selling analysis, and that is to say, I know that a customer should buy these products together, and are they doing that? Right? That approach is relatively straightforward from a technical perspective. It takes the form of running a report and saying, I want to run a sales report for these customers, and I want to do it for product 1, 2, 3, XYZ, ABC, right? I'll run the report for those products, and then I'll look at the report and I'll look through all the details to try and find situations where we have a gap. And that's where you get a traditional gap analysis type report. And it's usually a big giant grid of data, and in an ideal world it has some color coding in it that shows you where the zeros are or something like that. So you can see sort of a hole in this. Now, this can be relatively successful if you have good, nice, clear associations between those products that you can go in and do. It's relatively labor intensive. There's a fair bit of work that needs to be done. And it also has some challenges in that you have to do it for relatively large sets of information. It's hard to integrate into scorecards or dashboards because you're doing this analysis on a specific set of products, which may not be universally true for all of the customers. So it's relatively less technically sophisticated, a little bit more work, but it does provide benefit, and there is reason to do it. At the other extreme, you have something called statistical modeling or predictive analytics. And that approach says, okay, well, let's take a whole bunch of statistical algorithms and let's look at all this data and let's analyze it. And let's find customers that buy products or sets of products like these products that, based on mathematical models, are statistically likely to buy something else based on the historical patterns of other customers, and apply that and put it out there and then have the system sort of spit out this customer, this product, right? These very sort of statistically driven pieces of information that get kind of spit out of the system. And we think that's an interesting approach. We think that there's a future here, and there's something that can be done, and a lot of really big companies, you know, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies are employing hundreds of people to do this kind of work. Right? And their job is largely working with these models, cleaning up data sets, because you have to make sure and remove outliers and clean up the input of the data, and you have to structure it a certain way, and there's a lot of technical work that has to be done to get to a point where these models can actually spit something out that's going to be useful. And that's because I often think of this quote here when we're looking at and evaluating these types of predictive models, which is there's three types of what do they say? I forget exactly the context of the quote, right? But you guys remember this quote. Mark Twain sort of popularized it, right? There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics, right? Those are the three different ways that you can manipulate a group of people. And the statistical modeling approach suffers from some of that. It can be incredibly powerful if it's accurate. However, there's a lot of opportunity for inaccuracies to be introduced in those statistical models. So it's an industry that is maturing, and there's some interesting things going on there, especially you start hearing about all this machine learning and stuff like that that's going on that Apple and Google and the really big companies are out there doing. So it's very interesting, and it's definitely something for us to pay attention to. It's not necessarily something to build a product on today. At least that's our impression based on an analysis right now. The next piece, though, kind of slices in the middle of those two. And it's to say, we don't want to be just 100% directed, but we don't want to put all of our trust in the statistical modeling, right? We want to find somewhere in between the two, which is to say, how does this customer compare to the historical patterns of other similar customers? So I'm not relying exclusively on my own direction to say, show me these 4 products and who's buying them or not buying them or how the mix is. It's saying, let's look at customers and let's analyze a particular customer within the historical context of all the customers or a group of customers to see situations in which this customer might be different. And the reason we like this approach in the middle is that for most distributors, a lot of what the value add is in that business is we're doing a logistics service, right? We're making products available to you when you need them. But we also are experts in the products that we sell, and we know more about them. And it's very straightforward for someone to look at that report, if you're a sales rep or a domain expert in your business, and say, okay, well, which of these products should this customer be buying based on what I see? But let me use the data to inform that analysis, to inform that decision, and put something together that's going to speak directly to what they need. All right, so we did this kind of research, we thought through some of these things, we looked at all this different stuff. We came down to, here are the goals that we wanted to accomplish. This is what we're really trying to do. We want to identify areas where customers are not buying products that they should. Recommend that customers buy products, but a little parenthetical, high margin products. I don't want to go recommend people buy loss leader products that don't make any money. We'll talk more about that point a little bit here on the next slide. And then finally, we don't want to pitch products that we don't have, right? So it'd be one thing to say, hey, you should really buy this because it's a really fantastic product. Oh, by the way, I don't have any of it. I could get it to you in a couple weeks. Boy, that's embarrassing. I probably shouldn't have done that, okay? So those were some of the goals that we thought, okay, if we can accomplish this, we can give someone a very powerful set of information that they can use to help improve the engagement and interaction they have with a particular customer. So that second point, though, that high margin point, that was motivated by this analysis. This is a Harvard Business Review article published a while ago, but they did an analysis of a cross-selling initiative. And so they kind of pose a question, why wouldn't you try to sell your customers more products? Well, when they dug through the data and they did the analysis, they discovered that 1 in 5 cross-buying customers, so customers that are buying these multiple different cross-selling type opportunities, are unprofitable, right? So what we don't want to do is increase unprofitable business. We want to increase the profitable business. So that was a very interesting particular point that came up in that Harvard Business Review article that we thought was really interesting and directly applied to this. Okay, so let's talk about how we accomplish this thing. And to do that, I actually pulled some screenshots out of our system so that I could show you what we've constructed, and then we'll go take a look at what that looks like in the product itself. So in order to do this data-driven analysis for a cross-selling opportunity for a customer, the first piece of information that I have to have is a report about that particular customer. So this example is a report that's showing me the sales and the percent of total sales for a particular customer. So it's saying this customer buys 37.5% of what they buy from us is from this one particular product category, Zapex. That could be a product category, could be a product, could be another grouping of products. However you want to slice and dice those products. Product category is a pretty common one. Different, are they buying this type of product from us, right? So we need that kind of information, but it could also be an individual product, depends on your mix. We add to that a report that shows customers of a particular class. And so why do we do that? We layered in this concept that if you take a look at all of your customers that you sell to, you probably sell to different types of customers, right? Maybe it's as simple as residential versus commercial sales, right? Or these are contractors, and so that's going to be different. Or this is a really large company, and so we sell different sets of products to really large companies versus small ones, right? There are a variety of different ways that you can do that. But if you do some customer segmentation, you can say this particular group of customers should have this kind of buying pattern. A really great idea that came from one of the customers that we were working with when we were designing this was doing it off of the price, I think it was price type. So it's basically there is a certain way that you can configure the pricing to say, okay, these kinds of customers should get these kinds of prices. These kinds of customers should get these kinds of prices. That's a great way to categorize your customers because you're saying, I'm giving you certain discounts based on my expectations of what you're buying. So let me compare all the customers within that to see how they really are buying. Okay? So we've got this individual customer, and then we've got a group of customers. We put those things together and see them side by side, and we can start looking through that information to see things like, okay, this one particular customer spends 37% of their dollars on this one particular grouping of products, but everybody else spends 13%. That's kind of interesting. What about the next one? Well, Silware is the next highest, almost as high as Apex, right? 13%, but this customer only spends 5% of their dollars on that. And these products, Some Corporation and Zapcode, those product categories, this customer isn't buying at all in that top 10 or that top 5 listing there, right? So we can see that there are differences between the behavior of customers in general across this grouping, across this class of customers from that individual customer. Now, going line by line through those reports is doable. It's great. We have the information there. But in an ideal world, what we do is we put the reports together and then we calculate the difference between those sales. Right? So all we have here is the percent of total sales in the first column is one customer, percent of total sales in the second column is all customers within that grouping, and now we're calculating the difference and sorting by that, or filtering by it, or working with that column so that we now can very quickly highlight and pull out what are the product categories that customers in this group of customers buy that this customer doesn't. And what's the profit opportunity associated with that? We've added the profit percentage from the customer class. So we can say, well, when everybody else buys this, they pay 41, 45%, 37% gross margin, right? Which is way better than seeing that people pay 10% margin, right? If people are buying this product at relatively low margin and this customer isn't, that just increases the profitability of the customer, all other things being equal. So I don't necessarily want to pitch that product to them unless I can raise the price. Right? But there may be other opportunities, higher margin things that we aren't selling to that customer that we should. Okay? And now there's one more report that we need to put into this data set, and that is what we actually have on hand right now. So what do we have in inventory? What's there and what's available, and we can add that column there to the right. Okay, I do see a question in the panel here, so let's see. Okay, so there is a point here being made that the customer class report requires a solid customer classification to exist in the ERP. Obvious but no small task. Absolutely true that there is the challenge associated with grouping those customers up in different ways. Now, you don't have to do that. You could do this same report across all of your customers in your entire customer base. So there's no reason that you have to do it within a particular customer class. Our belief is that that will produce better results if you can do some of that segmentation, and it doesn't even have to be a ton of segmentation. It might be as simple as using MITS to spit out a report that shows you your customers sorted by sales dollars and just group them up into big, medium, small. And that's a way that you can at least get a sense of, you know, my other big customers buy products like this. If you sell into a relatively homogeneous customer base, if your expectation is that most of your customers should be buying similar types of things which is why you would do this comparison in the first place, right? If the whole customer base should behave somewhat similarly in the types of product and the product mix that they're buying from you, then you don't have to go through that classification project. There are other ways that you can do that customer classification. Like Texas A&M has a customer stratification philosophy and approach that they apply. So there are things like that that you could do as well. I think it is one of those things where you can make the classification task as difficult as you need it to be, but really the goal should be the minimum amount of classification we need in order to achieve the result, which is to weed out the obvious thing, right? Because we're able to sort of calculate the differences and be able to work on these sorts and filters, we could take this report and filter it very quickly to say, okay, show me situations where everybody else is buying it, this customer isn't, and the margin is above 40%. Right? That is a much smaller kind of targeted report. And even if you're doing that across your entire customer base, that's probably still going to produce some useful information. And that's really what we're trying to do, sort of improve the quality of the information that we're getting about a particular customer when we compare that customer to other people. Okay, so I've got a demo system that has this information sort of put together in it. So I want to show you a little bit about what that looks like when we work with it in a live situation. But also I want to kind of hit these points again because it's one of the things that we found is that as we were putting it together, that it is kind of a complicated concept, and we got to make sure that we organize this information in the right way, put it in the right place so that the right people, here there are a lot of rights that we got to get right. But if we do all of this work as we're designing it, then it should be a very effective way to increase your ability to cross-sell into your customer base. All right, so I'm going to log into my MITS demo system here, and I'm going actually directly to that report that we kind of constructed a step at a time. So I've got here, this is actually just showing me the top 5 product categories that are out of sync, right, with a particular customer. So this is that KXB Diagnostics, this is another customer, this is another customer, this is another customer. So this is kind of a useful way that you could say across your entire customer base or within a particular territory, right, maybe that's a warehouse, maybe that's a sales rep, right, but within those territories, where do we have situations where customers are strongly divergent from the averages in these areas? Right? So I can scan through this report and see, okay, KXB Diagnostics, right, 5%. So the biggest delta is that people typically spend 12% on this silverware product, but this customer only spends 5%. Here are 2 product groups that this customer doesn't buy at all, right? So 3.2% versus 2.2%, and we've got 0% over here. So they don't buy it at all. This one's at 35% margin. This is at 29% margin. This one they're buying 5% of that product versus 7%. So other people buy more of it. It's a 32% margin. Okay, that's interesting. The piece that was the most interesting to me was the idea of this sum tone product category, fake name, fake product group. Don't know what it means. You would if it was your system. But that product group sells to other people for 42% margin. Right? That's the most exciting opportunity that you have here. So I can click on sum tone. I can drill down by product and get down to a level where I can see all of the different products from that category that other people buy. Now, this is where your understanding of your product mix comes into play. Which of these is a product that you should recommend to that customer? That takes a little bit of knowledge about the customer, takes a little bit more information that we might need to know about the products themselves, which of these is going to be the best fit. But these are the products that I need to be looking for an opportunity for them to buy, right? And it's a list of 15 or so. So I've got a nice, tight, small list of products to apply. And looking through this list, you can see I've got 10 on hand, 14 on hand, 9 on hand, 12. So maybe I've got 83 of these ones right here that sells for 46% margin. If this product would fit the bill for this customer, that'd be a great one for us to move. All right. Any questions, thoughts on that? Take some time, put them into the Q&A panel. I definitely want to address those because this is really that big kind of concept of how can I quickly go through a report. And rather than driving this report off of what I think products should fit together, right, to drive it off of what the difference is compared to everybody else. Okay, so now that we've got this information and we have it organized in this way, we want to go beyond just using it in this one report. And so one of the things that we did is we put together a dashboard, and it's really a simple dashboard. It's really designed to be used as a source of information that would probably get integrated into your other existing dashboards that you have. But it's a dashboard that takes and organizes this information. And it does it as a listing, right? So here are the customer class, the product categories for that customer that they're not buying, right, on those same trends. So here you've got that sum-tone one here at that 41% margin, right? So the same kind of information we were looking at from the previous report. In addition, I've got a chart that shows the difference, right? So this is the customer, blue is the customer, red is the customer group. So you can see they spend way more on this product category than everyone else does, and then all of these other ones they buy way less, right? So if there was something in here that stood out, like why aren't they spending so much less on this when they buy it? Like if these are companion product categories, you got to wonder where they're getting this from, right? So either being able to see this kind of visually or seeing it in a grid format, depending on how your users are most confident working with that data, whether they want to see it in a grid or whether they want to see it in a chart. But if we can take that information and integrate it into something like a full-on customer scorecard, right? If I can go into KXB Diagnostics, pull back a big full screen picture of that customer that's going to include things like open quotes, open orders, invoicing activity, accounts receivable, right? That there's a view that we can construct where I can see, okay, I've quoted all of these products to this customer. So it could be that what I find when I look at a big picture view of this account and I get all those different data points put together in one place, it may be that that's something that I actually got out there and quoted at them, right? But for some reason they haven't bid on that. So what can I do in order to move that quote along? So they've expressed some interest, but I haven't closed that deal yet, right? Or maybe this is a product group that they used to buy much more of that they're buying less of now, right? Being to see that information in context for the full picture of the account, or maybe they owe us a whole bunch of money. Maybe I'm worried that these guys are actually going out of business, and so my problem here is bigger than this. But taking this idea of comparing the customer and integrating it into that full screen dashboard picture for that customer was what we were sort of moving towards as we were designing this feature, that we wanted it to be done in a way where you can compare this customer against others on this view where you're getting a big full screen picture of the account, kind of completing that picture of what the customer looks like for the business in total. Okay. Well, I think you guys have done a fantastic job of following along with that because I'm not seeing a ton of questions so far. I'm going to take that as a positive sign. I took it on as a challenge to try and explain this feature in a way that made sense. So if it doesn't make sense and you want some more information on this, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you post in the Q&A panel, we will follow up with you. We can always do a follow-up conversation. We think this is a really powerful way to start integrating data, more data into this analysis. And whether that's one individual doing this analysis, whether that's something that should be exposed to the sales organization, things like that, we want to figure out how to expose this information best inside your organization to help people make better choices with it. All right. So getting on to the next section of what we wanted to discuss today was this notion of warehouse logistics. And I was really excited when I was putting my slide deck together because I always avoid putting pictures of warehouses in our slide decks because it's a really common thing to do when people are doing presentations into the distribution world. But I figured this is one situation where I can use the warehouse picture because we're talking about the logistics of said warehouse. So let's talk about the warehouse logistics piece and what we are launching. The warehouse logistics component is something that has two very different extremes of what you can look at. And the way that we kind of think about it is that there's this analytics viewpoint and there's this kind of tactics or tactical viewpoint. Okay? And this is true in almost everything, but it's very present when it comes into warehouse logistics, right? So another way to kind of describe that is that analytics is a historical view of the data. Tactics is like right now. Right? And when we build new modules, we usually come to it from an analytics perspective. That's usually where we start. And it's not necessarily that it's the most important. Those two pieces are equally important. If we do a big analysis but we don't implement the tactics, then the analysis isn't going to matter, right? And if we're not doing the tactics really well, we're not producing the data to do the analytics. If we're not analyzing the data accurately, maybe our tactics are a big giant waste of time, right? These are two different components that are sort of balanced. I could have put this as a yin-yang kind of thing. We need to do both of these. But what we thought is that when it comes to the warehouse logistics piece, that we were going to focus on the tactics, the right now, the daily stuff first. So we wanted to articulate that goal as we wanted to make sure that we get a day's work done in a day's time, right? That there's this notion of logistics and customer service that are centered around the idea that this warehouse is able to fulfill the expectations of everything is done appropriately, right? In terms of staffing, in terms of workload, in terms of getting orders entered accurately at the right time, of making sure all the bins are assigned correctly and the zones are done and all that. Okay, so we put all of this stuff together and we created a tactical view of the warehouse logistics piece, okay? So we had to put together a lot of different information, but what this scorecard is showing, I'm going to show it to you live in the system, but one of the things that we kind of discovered as we were trying to put together the demo system for this is that it's really hard to demo because the goal for this module, for these sets of information, is that it's updated continuously throughout the day. I'm actually teasing one of my earlier slides here. So we'll take a look at this and we'll walk through some of the data that we're making available and how we're organizing it. But the theory is that this should be a view that we can start with that's going to show us throughout the day what information or what things did we not get done in the past. What were, if we just look in the middle column here, what were the picks that should have been done in the past, what should have been done? What do we have to do today, tomorrow, and in the future, and close, what have we actually done today, right? So we can see throughout the course of the day, is this going to be a busy day or is this going to be a slow day? Are we close to getting things done or do we have a lot of work left to do? Am I going to be able to catch up tomorrow or not? Right? So organizing that information around a tactical viewpoint so that we can every minute or two see what's going on in that entire warehouse in the organization. Okay, so let's see here. Whoops. All right. So in order to do this, we actually had to build a lot of new mappings. We had to pull a lot of information and write these new modules and put this new information in so that we could organize it, because it turns out that there's a lot of stuff that happens in the warehouse, right? You guys know this, but getting and sort of organizing that information and trying to put it into that form presents a challenge in terms of how you condense that information down into a relatively small set so that you can view it. So we had to put together these different modules, right? Open picks, open cycle counts, replenishment, packs, shipments, orders, open putaways, all of those different tasks that are happening in the warehouse so that you can see the balance between what's being accomplished across those different ways. And then we need a lot of different ways to kind of drill down and put together the columns that are going to organize that data. So I kind of jammed all of this stuff together. Some of these modules don't have all of the different drill downs because they don't apply to that data set, but here's kind of a snapshot of the information that's been mapped, right? Things like bins, the employee, the product, the stock status, what zone it's in, what warehouse it's in, the assignment, who it's assigned to, the carrier, how it's actually going to get out of the door, which obviously can have influence on what you prioritize, right, for your activities, the order status, the order type, and then taking those things and breaking it down. These column examples, you saw some of those on the scorecard that we looked at, right? But the cycle counts, requested today, closed today, requested tomorrow, into the future, picks and packs, right? The order count, line count, pallets to be put away that have been received and whether they've been put away, product count received, older than today, things like that, how many need to be moved, right, and replenishment. So you have the bins that they came from, the bins that they're going to, right, a lot of different ways to slice and dice this data. And then the most important piece is making sure that it can stay updated continuously throughout the day. We actually had to make some code changes to our system, add a couple of features. We have a new release coming out, version 10.1. If you're an existing customer, that's not available yet. It's going to be coming out here in about a week, maybe a week and a half. It's in QA right now. So they're going through and just making sure that we've squashed all the bugs, all the features have been written and stuff like that. And that will allow you to schedule builds to run more frequently throughout the day so that you can get all of that data up to date more continuously, but without placing undue burden on the system. Right? You have to be careful about how much load we place on the SX system continually throughout the day requesting these updates. We want to make that load lower overall rather than higher. So making sure that we've designed these in such a way that they're going to work really well with the system. Okay, in the demo, I mostly wanted to just show you guys what this kind of looks like. Oops, I teased my next slides there. That's okay. What it looks like in that demo system. And again, it's hard to describe how that's going to happen, but essentially what's going to happen is the information in terms of what needs to be picked today versus what has been closed, that information sort of moving throughout the day, right? So the demo system, as you can see, everything's in the past, right? Everything's in the past orders, past lines, right? Past picks, past packs. That's because our data set, that snapshot data set, is there in the past, right? But seeing how that's organized, right? What warehouse, what has to be done, whether it's our truck, is it FedEx, is it, our truck number 2, right? Speedy number 1, UPS ground, right? Different things that are going to have different due dates, work that needs to be accomplished, the replenishments or the cycle counts that need to be done today, right? And how many were done yesterday versus today, different things like that, so we can see what's happening and get a quick snapshot, single point location where we can look at that information. Okay, so I wanted to cover that. Obviously, as you can see, it's something where once you kind of see the dashboard and you see all that information laid out, it's a very dense set of information. The next step for us is going to be, okay, we've got all these different sources of information and we've got all the tactical piece of it put together. The next piece, and frankly, I'm glad that we did this tactical piece first, because I always get a little bit more excited when we start thinking about where we're going to go from a historical perspective. But now that we have the short-term tactical stuff, which in some ways was actually harder to put together because of some of the code changes and this notion of continually updating throughout the day and trickling all that data in, we had to make a few changes in order to make that efficient. But once we got that stuff taken care of, now we're turning our attention to, okay, what's the historical component? And what are the information sources? And what are the decisions? And who are the stakeholders that we can present this information, now that we have it from a tactical short-term perspective, into a historical perspective? So what kinds of decisions are we going to be able to make now that we have this information? We can look at it in the past and see how it changes over time. Okay, any thoughts or questions on those pieces? Please feel free to pop them into the Q&A panel. I'd be happy to show this in more detail. And I do apologize for not having a demo system that actually does this, but hopefully we'll be able to put together something that will show a little bit more clearly how these things can kind of sort of move across in time. Maybe we'll have to put a demo system that trickles transactions in throughout the day so that we can see how this thing will sort of continuously update as new information gets posted to it. Okay, so I have one more thing, and it looks like we're going to have a little bit of time to go through it, and that's this final piece of looking at bigger pictures of data. And this is something that as we put together more and more information that we've mapped into the MITS system, we're starting to go back and revisit some of these concepts that when we originally did it, it's kind of like the transition between when you first got a camera on your phone and when they added the panorama picture feature. Right? So now you have this ability to, from a point in space and time, say, hey, let me show you everything that it looks like when I'm up at the top of this mountain. Right? Let me show you what this looks like when I'm here. And let me give you a 180-degree picture of that, or a 360-degree picture of that, so we can see much more of the context than you would if it was just one little picture in the middle. And what we're finding is that as we map more and more sources of data into MITS, we're able to do a better job painting clearer pictures of what's happening in the business. And so some of the work that we've been doing is taking and pulling and modeling the different pieces of what's happening in the business. And this is something that we kind of put together, but it's very similar to what you would see in kind of a diagram explaining what happens in the ERP system as you're going through and doing all the different pieces of activity and all the places that you're putting information. So we're kind of trying to think through, okay, who are the different people and what are the different sources of information? What are the transactional tables and how does all that fit together? Because as we start to map more and more of these pieces, we're able to paint more complete pictures of what's happening in the business, and we're able to do it in places where we can very quickly answer questions that would be challenging to answer in the past. And so here's what I mean by that. There are 2 scorecards that we put together that we think illustrate this concept really well. We'll be rolling out more throughout the coming months. But the first is this notion of an executive review dashboard. A dashboard that allows you to see, how is my company's financial health? If I look at general ledger, accounts receivable, and accounts payable, is my company profitable, and do I have enough cash to continue to fund its operation when I look at our AR and AP? What cash is going out, what cash is coming in, and how much of it do I have? What does my sales funnel look like? What quotes are out there? What information or what sales have we booked that are open that will eventually invoice? Are those leading indicators trends heading in the right direction? Am I providing a customer service level that my customers expect? Do I have an appropriate fill rate and lead time based on the products that I'm selling? Is my inventory increasing or decreasing? Is it turning more or less? How much am I purchasing? And is that different than what I would expect or what the historical trends have been, right? That big full picture view that shows you what it's like to run your business, right? And it's not that this information is new. It's that we're trying to organize it and structure it in a way where you can start from the left and read to the right. And by the time you're done, if you're doing this on a weekly basis, this can become a source of information that would replace a dozen or more reports. Right? We don't necessarily want to overload. We don't want to add more reports. Ideally, we want to remove them or put them down to a minimum set of information that we need in order to make good and accurate decisions. No better example than that than the Product 360 scorecard. This concept is saying, all right, well, we built a view that's the biggest picture that looks at the whole company and looks at all those different pieces. But let's take a look at an individual item, and let's try to answer everything we possibly can about that item. How much is quoted? How much is open? How much has been booked? How does the price for this product get set? Who's overriding the prices, and what's the impact on margin? How much do we sell? Are we selling more? Are we selling less? Who do we sell it to? Are we selling it more or less? And how much margin do we make to those individual customers? How many purchase orders are out there? How much do I buy historically? Who do I buy it from? Who charges me the most? And who gives me the best service? Right? What different suppliers do I get this, or different vendors do I get this product from? What's their fill rate? What's their lead time? And how much are they charging me per item? What's my fulfillment of this product? Do I get it out to my customers in time? How much inventory do I have? Where do I have it in the company? And one of the things we did when we built the scorecard is we wanted to put it together in such a way where you can get there from anywhere in the system. So we wanted you to be able to say, okay, if I'm looking at a report like the one that we started before, where I'm looking at this sum-tone product area or this silverware or something like that, if I drill down to a product level and I see I want to sell them 83 of this product, I want to go to the Product 360 scorecard before I do that, because then I'll be able to know everything I need to know about that product, about that item, before I go and pitch it to the customer. And the fact that this scorecard shows up anywhere in the system that I am displaying a product means that I'm only one click away from getting over and getting access to that information, right? Consolidating it all in one place. Okay? So I think it's a very powerful concept. It's something that we're working more and more on every day as we put this information together, and we organize it in ways that we think will help assist with decision making, pulling all that together, and then making it accessible with 1 or 2 clicks. So let's see. I didn't see any questions in the Q&A panel. Let's see that I could answer really quickly. Oh, question right here. So has the TWL dashboard been released yet? That's a great question. We have put the dashboards together. We're just waiting to roll it out broadly until the MITS Discover 10.1 release has been out. So we have it on a couple of customer sites right now that we've been working on validating the data, making sure that everything's accurate, making sure that it's all organized. But we haven't yet released the feature in MITS Discover that allows it to continuously update throughout the course of the day. So the dashboard work has been done. We're waiting on that release of MITS Discover. We expect that to be done in the next week or 2. And that will be the point in which we say, okay, we feel pretty confident now that we can roll these out live throughout the course of the day, which is what you really need to make best use of those modules. So we did the work of designing the dashboards, and we could technically release them, but we decided to wait until that 10.1 release because we think that that continuous update piece is a critical part of that, and making it successful in rolling it out, since it has all that tactical what's going on today data. So that was a great question. Thank you for asking that. I'm not seeing anything else there that looks like we can address it very quickly. So I think to close things out, Colin, are you still on the call there? Oh, looks like maybe your audio is turned off. No worries. So if you do want more information about MITS, feel free to reach out to either Colin or I. If you don't have MITS or you haven't seen a demo, a lot of the stuff that I talked about today is not necessarily going to be fitting very well into the big picture. There's a lot of stuff that we do with MITS beyond what we discussed today. So feel free to reach out to Colin, and he can get you set up with a demonstration so you can see kind of from a more complete perspective what's everything everything that we can do with the software. How can we help integrate it into your business? If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, I'd love to hear from you. You know, we do a lot of work with distributors putting together these concepts, trying to take the best, brightest ideas that we hear from our customer base and try to turn them into something we can support well in the core software. That's really what I've been showing you today. These are all things that were designed in conjunction with some of our customers, and these are concepts that they have found useful. If you think that there's a different approach that could be taken with this content to make it more powerful, please let me know. We'd love to get that feedback. We think it's a critical part of designing these things in such a way that you can make use from them. So please do reach out if you have any comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, things you think that man, you are just so close. If only you did this. We really do want to hear that. Thanks so much for your time and attention today, guys. I know that it's sometimes difficult to sit on a webinar and listen to someone drone on and on for 45 minutes, but you guys have been a very attentive audience. I really appreciate that. If there's anything that we can do to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. Other than that, have a very good day. I hope you have a wonderful fall schedule coming up.